Hi there. Welcome to another episode of Tinnitist TV. Today, I am talking to Michael Azerrad. Everybody wants a do-over. It's true in life, it's true in rock, and it's the driving force behind Nirvana, the Amplifications, music writer Azerrad's absorbing, admirable, and personal sequel to his acclaimed 1993 bio, Come As You Are, The Story of Nirvana. He wrote that book at the urging of Kurt Cobain and Courtney Love, who claimed they wanted him to, quote, just tell the truth. But Azerrad now believes they saw him as a sympathetic, easily led novice who could help whitewash their damaged reputation. And he admits he unknowingly did their bidding by being too trusting, failing to fact check their claims due to a tight deadline, and even ignoring negative stories to stay in their good books. In his new work, A Labor of Love, crafted with 2020 hindsight and brutal honesty, he re-examines and rewrites the whole story, pulling no punches when it comes to Cobain or himself. With the amplifications in stores and the 30th anniversary of Cobain's death on the way, Azerrad zoomed in to discuss the book, Nirvana, his current musical tastes, and plenty more. Enjoy.
Hey there.
Hey there, Michael Azerrad. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good today, sir. Thanks for dialing in. Thanks for taking the time to talk to me today.
Oh, thanks for inviting me.
Oh, my pleasure. I know I'm a little late to the table in terms of the fact that the book came out a few months ago, but Kurt and Nirvana seem to be kind of an evergreen subject, you know?
Yeah. There's no time limit on talking about any book.
No, I agree. I agree. And I suspect we'll be inundated with a lot more stuff this spring, given that it's yet another anniversary coming up in terms of his death.
Yep. I'm
Exactly.
I'm afraid so.
Yeah,
Hopefully
well,
some of
it's
it.
kind of an endless cycle. I remember talking to Mark Arm many years ago, and he pointed out to me that, the thing is their career was kind of essentially 4 years and change. So it kind of fits into that perfect cycle of every 5 years, there's another, anniversary of the 20th of this and then the 25th of that. And it was a never-ending cycle for him, which he was, less than thrilled about.
Hmm. Great point. Mark Arm is a bright guy.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
anyway, obviously, as I think I mentioned in the review I wrote of your book, I was really quite impressed with it, more than I expected to be, simply because typically with things like this, the obvious thing that people do is they write a new introduction, or maybe they write an epilogue, whereas you essentially chose to write a new book.
Yeah.
Um, that seems like a gargantuan task to dip into. What made you decide that this had to be done that way?
Well, I whenever you write something, and I'm sure you've experienced this, as soon as you hit send, there are things that occur to you that I wish I could change that, or wish I could fix something or tweak something. And that feeling accumulates more and more over the span of 30 years, especially when it's a book you've written that has stayed in print and has been scrutinized and read over and over by, many, many people. And there are things that, maybe you that are wrong, or you just simply want to clarify or add on to. And that was the impetus for it. Just thinking back on all the things I wanted to comment on or correct. And during the pandemic, like so many other people, I started to do something that I've always wanted to do but never had the time to, which is write some notes about Come As You Are. And I wrote one, and that was kind of satisfying. And I thought I'd put that in a blog post and, you know, uh, put the link up on social media, and anyone who wanted to look at it could look at it. But then I decided, oh, maybe I'll just look at the page one and see if there's anything on page one I wanted to say something about. And yes, there was something I really had to say something about. It was about how I treated Aberdeen in light of how Kurt described it. And I wrote something about that. And then I turned the page two. Oh, got a lot to say about this. And that just kept going for about 2 years. And by the end, I had gone through the entire book, and there were all kinds of things to say about not just the book, but the practice of journalism, the way that Nirvana fit into 90s culture, politically, musically, culturally in general. There was so much to say. And it just became a full-time job. I got really obsessed with it. And yeah, it became what amounted to a second book. So yeah, it's not, you're right, exactly. It's not a new final chapter. It's not a revised edition. It's an annotated version with another book's worth of commentary. It's got about 100, literally hundreds of annotations
Right.
woven through the book as a dialogue between um, the Michael Azerrad that wrote "Come as You Are" in 1993 and the Michael Azerrad that you're looking at right now.
Right. And you mentioned to me that you were, I don't know if inspired by, but that it kind of the other book that only other book that I could think of, or that you could think of, because I couldn't think of any,
Mm,
that uses the same sort of approach was
mm,
Robert Greenfield's "Ain't It Time We Said Goodbye" on the Stones '72 tour. Was
yeah.
that something? Was that? I mean, which was the chicken and which was the egg? You know what I mean in terms of applying it to this work?
Definitely my urge to write some glosses, on my book. And a little later on, I came across Robert Greenfield's book, and I just felt really validated. I thought, yes, this is you can, I can do this, and I just kept going.
I'm
But
amazed that more people haven't done it, you know?
yeah, yeah, it is amazing. I don't know why. I think partially it's just because um not many rock books lend themselves to that kind of treatment.
Mm,
Um, in the intervening 30 years, we've learned so much about Nirvana. We've gained so much perspective about their place in our culture and
right.
music culture and so on. But also, I think, um, frankly, the original "Come as You Are" has sold like hundreds of thousands of copies around the world. It's still in print. It's been translated, I think, into 14 languages.
Hmm.
So it's a popular book, and I think a popular book probably would be more likely to get signed by a publisher, frankly.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to wonder. I mean, it's even given, you know, what happened, it's still kind of surprising that the book is still in print and Nirvana are still as popular as they are. I mean,
Mm.
you know, I have no idea why that is, aside from I don't know. I mean, obviously the music is outstanding. The story is compelling. Um, but still, it's kind of, you know, one of those 30 years ago. My God, how much time has passed? It's just stunning to think of it, you know?
Yeah, I think that um, well, while Nirvana existed, they really embodied authenticity, passion, realness
Hmm.
in a pop world that had just previously been dominated by some pretty fluffy stuff. Some of it like literally fake, like Milli Vanilli.
Mhm.
And kids, the music buying public was really hungry for something real.
Hmm.
And I I I think that that problem of fakery and lack of passion and things like that has only continued in the intervening 30 years. It's maybe even gotten worse. I mean, there's so much fake stuff, fake news, and AI generated content, and all fake food, and fake politicians and fake blog posts or tweets and social media. There's a lot of stuff that is not real, and want people have, a lot of them anyway, have a basic need for something that's real and authentic and true. And Nirvana still stands for that value. And so they're a totem. They represent that I think unextinguishable feeling.
Good point. And I mean, I think the book kind of ties in with that in the sense of there aren't a lot of people going back these days and um, correcting the record on things. We live in an era where now everybody just doubles down and
Mm,
post truth and all that stuff, as opposed to going, well, I could have done this differently. I should have done this better. Yada, yada. So
yeah.
going back to the book as you did, you're a different writer now than you were 30 years ago. Just on that sort of aspect of it, how did it hold up to you? And was that change in voice any kind of a challenge when you were writing the new material in terms of, trying to, I don't know, make it flow or have them align and not be jarring?
I think the change in voice, I've matured as you know, a writer and a person, in the intervening 30 years. I think that contrast is, uh, in my view, like one of the strengths of the book,
Mm,
because like I say, it's a dialogue between my 1993 self and myself of today. And that's, I think, what makes the book unique and interesting is someone, to use, the current parlance, interrogating their former self,
right.
not just as a journalist, but kind of as a human being. So there's that level of it, and as far as the quality of the original book, I stand by it. I think it's remarkably good considering I wrote it in something like 9 or 10 months. That's incredibly fast, and I think it's well written. It's most it's pretty strong on a factual basis. There are things I got wrong or didn't know, but not some of the things I didn't know are quite important, but I couldn't be blamed for that. And then some of the facts, I don't know. I don't think there are any really major facts wrong. So I stand by the original book. It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
that it's what they call a rich text. There's just so much to say about it because it was created while the band still existed in the 90s. It's
Mhm.
a product of its time. It's written like on the fly with there's no 2020 hindsight. It's like I was right in the middle of it. And I think that's why it's so ripe to be commented on, because it is so of its time.
Right. And now you have the hindsight that you can and did apply as the overlayer, as it were. Yeah.
Yeah. The hindsight and the yeah benefit of 30 years of just personal wisdom. um YouTube was also a tremendous help in researching and verifying and amplifying things. So there was a lot that helped shine a light on the original book.
Were there things that you remembered one way and then went back and found, oh, actually, no, it didn't happen that way at all?
um no, I think I was pretty accurate about remembering my own incidents. I think it was more a matter of bringing to light things that I saw or experienced personally that didn't make it into the book.
Right.
And I think and a lot of the book is about the process of writing a book.
Mhm.
The things that you see on the page are you know a a portion of what the author actually experienced. And there's
Sure.
so much that happens around a book. It's not just, you don't just sort of teleport into someone's kitchen, as I did. I interviewed Kurt in his kitchen a lot, or his living room. You just don't teleport into their kitchen and start talking. There are things that happen around the interview, and developing your connection to the subject that at the time may not seem significant, but later on seem incredibly powerful. Or there are things that happened that you experienced or saw after the book was finished and that you couldn't put in the book. And that's another thing that forms a large part of the Amplified Come As You Are, is all the things that I experienced after the book was done that couldn't make it in. And that's, some of the heaviest, most intense material, I think, of the entire book.
Well, what was it like emotionally then for you to, go through this again? Because obviously it's been a long time, and it's not the wounds aren't necessarily fresh, but it is still kind of reopening them to some degree, I would imagine.
Well, I would not. I actually, a lot of the wounds, have never closed. There's something about the nature of suicide that just causes a permanent uh, tear, in your heart and soul, and that never really goes away. So you're really just spent just trying to cope with it and understand it, and uh, try not to beat yourself up about it. I think a lot of people who know people who have committed suicide have a lot of self-blame and wondering, if they could have done or said something to prevent it. So you discuss that in the book a lot too.
Hmm.
But a lot of it is about, a lot of the Amplified Come As You Are is about, coping uh, with that shock, which I think fans of Kurt and Nirvana share as well. Perhaps not as directly personally, but the grief and pain is still there. Um, so, but it's also it's making sense of what happened to Kurt, but also making sense of what happened to Nirvana, and making sense of what happened in the '90s. If you live through that time, or if you were born after that time and are trying to understand what happened. A lot of it was like that for me, personally. And I figured if I could figure out those things for myself, maybe it would help the reader figure those things out too.
What was it? Was it cathartic? Did it help? Was it healing in a way to write this, to get it all out again?
Yeah, 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 it really was. Because you know, um, writing is based on thinking, and if you can manage to get a thought down on a page, it means if you get it down right, it means you've pieced it together in a way that's coherent enough to articulate in a sequence of words, and that was it was very therapeutic, yeah, in a way. And I think that was the only process I think I could have used to arrive at whatever sense of you know peace and resolution I'm at now, was writing it out.
Right.
And maybe second best is reading it. We'll see.
Yeah. One thing you mentioned to me was that you didn't do any supplementary interviews for this. There is a
Mm.
huge amount of supplementary material that you've drawn from other people's books, other interviews, etc. But
Mm.
you didn't physically go out and talk to anybody yourself. It kind of begs the question, why not?
Because I was because that would go down a rabbit hole of doing a
Open up
whole
a
bunch of
Pandora's box, and yeah,
yeah, the but also the central conceit of the book it's an annotated book.
right.
So the source material is Come As You Are, the Story of Nirvana, a biography of Nirvana published in 1993. And the point is to annotate that book, not to write uh, a new separate book based on new research. I was There was enough there in the book to comment on and shed light not only on the book, not only on the practice of journalism, but on Kurt and Nirvana and the whole phenomenon that surrounded them. So the, that was the conceit of the book. That
Mm.
and I had to stick to that, or I would go down a deep dark rabbit hole, and the book would still not be out right now.
Right.
I would still be working on it. So
Were
that was
you
the idea. It's an annotated book, and there is a great precedent for that. There's a beautiful Alice in Wonderland annotated book by Martin Gardner. It's just a wonderful annotated Walden, the annotated Lolita. It's an excellent book, and those books uh, simply commented on the text at hand and found plenty to say. And those were my marching orders. Those books.
were you at all trepidatious about putting this out?
Oh well, I think any writer, with any sense of self-awareness is trepidatious about almost anything they write. Uh, I'm trepidatious about tweets I put up, about
Sure, these days especially.
albums I love, so yeah, I mean, you're always trepidatious.
Mhm.
Especially there's a lot of really personal stuff in the book, and I've never written like that ever. I There was one piece I wrote uh 2008 or so, I think, for Spin, which was the first time in print that I'd used the first person singular.
Mhm.
Like, I never write about myself, and this is the first time I've ever done it. And it's I took a risk, but I had to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Have you had much reaction or any reaction from the surviving members or anybody else in that camp?
Yes. I've heard from people, within the Nirvana tribe,
Hmm.
in the Seattle, very close knit Seattle old school rock crew, and all of them love it. They went out of their way to thank me, and I can't tell you how touching and validating that is, because
Right?
I'm a New Yorker. I'm a New Yorker. I'm not from Seattle, although a lot of people think I am. And I'm an outsider, and Seattle's a very, closely knit community.
Amazingly so. Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a bunch of people in there, and it's amazing how much cross-pollination there is between people you honestly kind of think wouldn't have much to do with each other. Where I remember talking once to Ann Wilson of Heart, and she was talking to me about working with the Pearl Jam guys, or you'll talk to Duff McKagan, and he'll talk about working with somebody else, and they all. It seems like almost a small town in terms of the music scene there still, which is remarkable.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it was, back in,
Or so, yeah.
in Duff's day, and the original OG Seattle bands. It was a small city, and it
Mhm.
was a small scene, and it was overlooked. Like, um, there were no A&R people coming up from LA to check out the bands. They were just doing it for the hell of it, and they all showed up to each other's shows and supported each other. So yeah, it was a very close knit community. I think, much more than a lot of scenes, because it was so remote, and like I say, Seattle was, in the mid to late '80s, was still pretty small town.
Yeah, so getting
So
the thumbs up from them must have been, as you said, just a tremendous, I think a tremendous relief too, given all the,
yeah,
putting yourself out there in the way that you did with this.
yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things I really appreciated about the book was the way you gave us a fully rounded portrait of so many people involved, especially Kurt, which I guess is obviously a function of the uh, access you had to him, both the proximity and in terms of over the amount of time you spent with him. So many other books. Well, I mean, obviously the nature of a lot of music journalism is you get somebody on the phone for 20 minutes, or maybe if you're lucky, spend a little amount of time with them, as opposed to the great lengths of time that you spent with these people. So it's kind of the catch 22 of that book, in a way, is that you spent enough time with them to be able to see all these facets of them, but then you establish a connection with them that is, obviously was part of the emotional impact for you in terms of everything that went on. But was that I don't know. I guess one of the things that struck me in the book, one of the moments, you talk about being backstage somewhere, um, and Courtney Love comes running up to you with a picture, I guess you had taken uh, with their daughter. I think maybe it was. I can't remember if I'm remembering the moment right.
Yeah. Courtney had taken a picture of Kurt and me with Francis on my lap.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just such a lovely, again, such an indicative moment. I think you even follow it up with something that says something like she could be wonderfully,
Yeah.
uh, wonderful at times.
Hmm.
Um, was that I mean, were there moments that you kind of went, I don't want to put that in because that's a little bit too, um, telling something that maybe should just remain private?
Huh. I'm trying to think if anything I left out along those lines.
No?
No, I can't really think of anything. If I left out stuff, I don't know. I just thought it was not significant.
Right.
Not that it was too private. But I tried to put in, include moments, telling moments like that, that may not uh, have surfaced in people's previous conceptions of what uh, the band or Kurt or Courtney were really about. Just trying to knock down some myths and preconceptions.
Yeah.
People,
That was a very deliberate part of what you wanted to do with the book in terms of elaborating on what they were like, giving us a more fully rounded kind of portrait of them?
well, I was pretty sold on the indie rock scene of the 80s, which was a very egalitarian movement. You know, no one's a star. The audience and the bands are part of the same community, and they're equal partners in making this thing happen. And Nirvana also deeply believed in that, which made them so uncomfortable when they became big stars. But I went into Come As You Are with the idea of humanizing the
Yeah,
band, who were getting rapidly turned into cartoons, which is
right.
just exactly counter to reality. They were actual, just real people, and I wanted to portray them as people that the reader could relate to, which was exactly true. They
Mhm.
all came from broken homes. They had miserable times in high school, and there's so many points of that people could relate to the members of Nirvana. They weren't freaky princelings. They were just they were people you could relate to, and that I found that out the second I met Kurt, when I did a Rolling Stone cover story on Nirvana in early '92. I was very worried about meeting him, but the second I met him, I felt comfortable. He was like a million people I knew in high school.
Right.
And so that was the point of Come As You Are, and that was the point of the amplified Come As You Are, to continue to humanize these people, if only to show the reader that um, ordinary people, quote unquote, ordinary people, can do extraordinary things.
Right.
It's not left to some, you know, uh, uh, special elite, on the coasts.
Right.
Anyone can do something great.
I also
And
appreciated the fact that you kind of spread the blame around, as it were, in terms of you mentioned in the book that you now after the fact kind of realize that they wanted to use you to kind of polish their image, during this whole custody problems they were having
hmm,
after the Vanity Fair stories and all the other stuff. And
hmm,
and I think a lot of people would have kind of, that, and maybe justifiably so, felt a lot of resentment over that, and kind of have it taint the whole thing for them. But you in the are I think are quite gracious in going, well, here's how I was at fault, here's how they were at fault. There was plenty of blame to go around, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, in today's, media environment, there isn't a lot of room for nuance, and I try to, portray a nuanced situation. And I would also add that, as much as Kurt in particular was trying to, hide things from me, he also revealed a lot. I mean, there is a lot of incredibly heavy stuff in Come As You Are. It's
Mhm.
it's mind blowing how much they revealed. And it, today's bands are way more self-protective and savvy about that sort of thing. But this, like, you're not going to see a band reveal all that kind of stuff in a book, I think, ever again. And that's again why kind of it makes the original Come As You Are worth commenting on. Every once in a while, I just have to stop and point out to the reader, do you realize what they're saying here? It's sometimes it's just staggering, and we take it for granted. I think maybe partially just because the book is so popular and we all know those facts. But if you stop and look at it with some sort of objectivity, like some of the stuff they say in there is just remarkable.
Well, it raises an interesting point. I mean, because we live now in an era where newspapers are hiring Taylor Swift correspondents, and it's just become this sort of, I don't know, almost parasitic relationship of things. Is Could there be, more books like this? Is that sort of era of music journalism maybe dead and gone, do you think?
I don't know if most musicians, would, be so candid
Hmm.
ever again. But maybe, with the right artist and the right writer, could happen. I'm not in the habit of ruling out things like that. Could happen. I'm just saying it's it's way less likely. Artists are way more savvy about their image and way more controlling. I mean, for instance, you bring up Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift does virtually no interviews.
Hmm.
She controls how she is perceived, and probably a lot of artists will follow suit.
Yeah.
They'll control the information that is let out. And there will be other artists who rebel against that, but they may not be as huge as Taylor Swift.
Right. I mean, it's kind of it's surprising the access you had even at that time because, I mean, my experience has probably been similar to yours in the sense of the two best times to talk to bands or musicians are right at the beginning of their career when they're just thrilled that you want to talk to them and happy and eager to, let you in and discuss whatever you want to talk about. And then they, once they kind of start to get popular, and this applies to Taylor Swift too. I interviewed her a few times back in the day of the first couple of albums. And then once they start to get big, the cocoon and the bubble and the media management and everything really takes hold. And yeah, they're gone, and often start, I think, believing their own, infallibility and wonder. And
Mm.
then, maybe 20 years later, after the hits have fallen off and they're back to playing theaters and all that, they return to, oh, I'm thrilled to talk to you again.
Hmm.
So, but even I can see how Nirvana would have been, hey, great, yeah, come on in and talk to us at the time because they were still, for all intents and purposes, kind of a new band. Um, but I'm even surprised that back in that day, the industry, didn't already cocoon them because now I think that's also something the business has learned about managing that stage, managing those images as fast and as quickly as possible.
Yeah, the stage managing has gotten quite advanced by this, 30 years later. But I'm not sure that Nirvana and particularly Kurt had grown quite wary of the press by the time I interviewed them.
Mm,
He was pretty sick and tired of it, and in fact, in our original conversation about the book,
right,
he told me, and this is a quote: "Just tell the truth. That'll be better than anything else that's been written about me."
right, right.
And so
And you
he
had
was
already
he was
burned
pretty,
Dave Grohl, right? In the
yeah,
Rolling Stone
yeah,
spin. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
and but Dave, um, Dave spoke to me because Kurt asked him to,
Right.
and Krist was also, quite happy to speak with me and was, incredibly candid as well. I think, speaking of Krist, like that was another uh, kind of clarification that I wanted to put into the Amplified Come As You Are, which is his role is so unsung in the success of Nirvana. Um, Starting with his bass playing, he's an exceptional bass player. He played really really cool parts, really solid, which was really important because Kurt was not the most solid,
Right.
and so but he played really beautiful parts. And like on All Apologies or something like that. You listen to the bass playing; it's gorgeous. And but that's not the limit of what someone in a band does. There's all that time in the van, in the rehearsal space, at sound check, sitting around in managers' offices and attorneys' offices and the publishing
Hmm.
uh, companies' offices, and all that stuff. And Krist was a rock for Kurt, and I think for the band in general. He ran a lot of their affairs early on. He just has a lot of horse sense and great people skills. And as I say in the Amplified book, I'm not sure Nirvana would have happened without Krist.
Hmm.
And that I just think that has not been said nearly enough. And that's the kind of thing that jumped out at me as I read the original book. It's like, wow, in retrospect, Krist was incredibly key to this whole thing, and that's got to be said. So I said it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, it always does seem too like there's one of those guys in almost every band that you later learn about who was, yeah, maybe there was the front man who was, the focal point of all the attention, but there's almost always one guy behind the scenes who's making sure all the gear gets there and that they have a hotel room and or getting the money from the bar owner at the end of the night. The
Yeah,
unsung
that's
heroes, yeah.
there's a book called Postcards from the Boys, basically by Ringo Starr, and it's just reproductions of postcards that the other Beatles sent him while they were on vacation. And I guarantee you that no other Beatle got postcards from all the other Beatles. It was Ringo. Like Ringo was this, the social center of that band, and I think he was the glue that
Yeah.
kept things light. And and that is an incredibly crucial aspect of being in a band. It's
Hmm.
not just what happens on stage and on the records. It's like the other 23 hours
Oh,
of
yeah.
being in a band.
Well, I
And
mean, yeah, I'm sure you've had people tell you this like they've told me. It's you can find all kinds of guys that you can be in a band with, but to find somebody that you can be in a van with, that's the real challenge.
yeah, it's why a team of all-stars isn't necessarily the best team. It's
Yeah.
it's the team that can play well together.
Yeah, and hang out together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Talking about listening to Nirvana, you mentioned in the book that obviously your ability to do it and the way you react to the music and what you hear and feel has changed over time, uh,
Mm.
as it would. Where is it at now? Is it something that you can listen to, want to listen to?
Yeah, yeah, for a long time after Kurt's death, I just
Mhm.
couldn't bring myself to listen to Nirvana's music. It was so painful, especially in utero songs. I mean, the pain just comes screaming out of those songs. And if you're privy to some aspects of his personal life, little
Yeah.
offhand comments he said um, that remind you of certain lyrics in the songs, or even just the sound of the music. It hurts. It really was. You know, part of his greatness was that he had such a direct connection from his innermost soul to his outermost
Right.
music. And so it was really difficult to listen to. But at some point, I was out with a bunch of friends I don't know, this is maybe 15 years ago, something like that. I don't know. But it was out with at a bar, and there was a loud music playing at this bar, and suddenly they played a whole block of Nirvana songs. And instead of just kind of like discreetly walking out and standing out in the street watching the cars go by, as I often did, I just sat and listened. And I realized that they rocked,
Sure.
and it's not just that they rocked, but um they rocked to transcend pain.
Hmm.
That was the whole point, to provide, some sort of solace from all this pain that particularly Kurt was feeling inside and bodily, everything. Um uh and it worked. Like, you listen to Nirvana music and you forget about what hurts you. And that was a really, really big realization. And that's another thing, kind of a motif that I keep coming back to in the Amplified Come As You Are. Particularly, often at the end of shows, Kurt would throw himself into the drums or the amps. And I think a big part of that was a proof of concept to show that this music had actually made him impervious. And that was kind of a big breakthrough for me
Right.
for understanding what Kurt was up to. And I hope I conveyed that in
Right.
the
Oh,
new edition.
definitely. But I mean, if you put it on today, is there still something that you get from it?
Yeah, that sense of transcendence.
Okay.
It's no accident that the band is called Nirvana. Nirvana is the freedom from worldly cares and pain. And if you just surrender yourself to the music, it will probably happen.
Yeah.
That's a pretty that's why they're such an amazing band. I mean, I don't throw on Nirvana music now just like, hey, it's a quiet Saturday afternoon. I think, oh,
Yeah.
um, uh, I wouldn't blame people who do. I think it's great, but I hear it more now by accident, and I love it. Like, it's more fun that way, actually. So you're just
Yeah, it was.
walking down
I
the
mean,
street.
I went down the rabbit hole after while reading the book, obviously as one would, and
Mm,
and I found it just made me sad. I mean, I hadn't listened to it for years because you don't really need to. It's kind of, I think, encoded on my DNA as much as yours, right?
yeah, yeah.
Same way, I don't really need to listen to the Beatles or the Rolling Stones anymore. I can hear those songs, instantly. But putting this on, and maybe it was because it was done in conjunction with the book,
Mhm.
so they're kind of impacting each other. But yeah, the fact that so much is written right there in the songs in terms of, you know, here's what's coming. And just then I think again the passage of time of the what might have been just
Mm.
made me kind of go, geez, you know. I found it hard to get the joy out of it at that point. I think maybe at some point in the future that will come back, but you
Mm.
know.
Yeah. Everybody, perceives it differently.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
what do you listen to nowadays? I mean, are you still someone who is keeping up with everything that's coming out on a weekly basis, or are you kind of, sticking to uh, the stuff you loved and were writing about and grew up with? And I mean, I see you've got hundreds of CDs there behind you, so
Mhm.
you know, what's on your playlist on a regular basis?
It's so funny. I listen to a broad range of stuff,
Sure.
chronologically. Um, I don't know, lately I just did I'm just really into Louis Jordan.
Oh yeah,
The
fantastic. Yeah.
jump music
Yeah.
maestro from the 40s and 30s, 40s, and probably 50s.
Up to the
Um,
50s, yeah, Caledonia and all that stuff. Yeah.
yeah, he might have, I think he died in the 70s, maybe.
Hmm.
But yeah, so I don't know, I love Louis Jordan, but um really love the new Laurel Halo album, Atlas. It's like electronic music. I love I call them my beloved Deerhoof. What a completely great band. I love Odaboke Beaver, the
Yeah,
Japanese band.
yeah.
Love them to bits. Yeah, I don't the new Lloyd Cole album on Pain is incredible. Yeah, I don't follow new music quite as closely as I used to. I you could, in the 90s and well into the 2000s, you could probably play me a snippet, of
Mhm.
any band, and I would say, oh, that's Kings of Leon, or Dirty Projectors, who I also love.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, but now, not so much. But I still avidly follow um, new music, and there's something about um, music that's just, I don't know, that sounds new to me. It sounds like, I don't know, somehow futuristic. Like if I had heard Laurel Halo in 1990,
Hmm.
I would have been blown away. I would have thought, like, or Jalen,
Yep.
what is this? I'm not even sure I could perceive this as music. What is it? And I love thinking about how music has progressed, and how uh, the progression of music itself, the progression of technology, and just the way we perceive the world enables us to both make and appreciate new kinds of music. And I'm not sure I will ever get tired of that feeling. That's that's what I'm in it for, a
Oh, yeah.
lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I mean, I love it. You remember as well as I do 30 years ago when you would get whatever number of new releases that came out that week, and that was pretty much it. And nowadays, I don't know what somewhere 50,000, 100,000 new songs being uploaded every single day. And granted, 90% of it is probably not worth your time and effort,
Mm.
but there's just an infinite amount of stuff to go out there and find, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I've been seeing that reflected in top 10 year-end top 10 lists.
Mhm.
Back, in the day, they were pretty, there was
Uniform.
not a whole lot of variation. You'd see the same, a great degree of overlap, in people's top tens. Now you look at people's top tens, and they're completely diverse. There's not a whole lot of agreement. Although I would say, uh, I saw a lot of Olivia Rodrigo, Boy
Mm.
Genius,
Yeah.
um, some of those, a couple other artists that were pretty consistent. But for the most part, people were finding really diverse, really obscure stuff. And I think that's really exciting, and that's a function surely of, yeah, the internet and
Well, it's
streaming.
a concentration of everything. I mean, now we have, a handful of mega artists. And then everybody else, you know what I mean?
Kind
It's
of a 1%, you mean?
Yeah, well, it kind of parallels that whole thing. I mean, the same way the middle class has been eroded economically, I think you could say you could apply the same lesson to the music business. You're either Taylor Swift or you're, you know,
Yeah, that's where I was going with that.
yeah, exactly, precisely. So you did Come As You Are, and then you followed it up with Our Band Can Be Your Life,
Hmm.
and I would think that after those books, you must have had lots of offers and ideas and possibilities open to you, but we're still waiting for another book.
Yeah, well, I have never felt that I, owed the world, a book. Um, I'm a human being, not a bookmaking machine,
Sure.
and I decided to do other things. Like I was the editor in chief of the music download site eMusic for several years. So, I learned how to be an editor,
Hmm.
and I work with some really, some of the best writers in the country, and probably, I guess, in the UK as well, at eMusic. So I got to have that experience and that skill, and uh, let's face it, a steady paycheck and health insurance.
Sure.
So I've been doing things like that, or um, banging out the occasional article for the New Yorker or the New York Times, or
Right.
etc. I just did a piece for the Yale Review on Sonic Youth. So yeah, I don't know. Writing a book, some people can bang out books.
Yes, and
I,
do. Yes.
yeah, and it shows. It's there's a sort of workman-like aspect to their writing, and I respect people who are workman-like, but that's not me. If I write a book, I put everything into it. It's I work from the moment I wake up to the moment I can't keep my eyes open any longer
Mm,
every day. And I can't help myself. I guess I'm a workaholic when I get onto a book.
mm. Well, then probably
And
best you didn't jump
yeah,
right
and
into another
yeah,
one.
it takes a toll on your physical health and your mental health and your friendships. And I really have to think carefully before I start a book.
Mm,
And the Amplified Come As You Are was perfect because in the depths of the pandemic, I didn't have a social life to lose. I had nothing else to do but work, and so that fit really, really well. And I've also edited books, like I edited Bob Mould's autobiography, See a Little Light, and I've done other editing, but emphatically not ghostwriting of other people's books.
right.
And that's kind of where I want to go, frankly. I have an idea for another big book that I can't talk about yet. But in the meantime, I love collaborating with other writers, with motivated, talented, motivated people who are, good writers, but need that extra little push. And I love doing that. And it's incredibly satisfying to collaborate. So I'm doing that, and that's sort of invisible because sometimes my book isn't on the cover of the my name isn't not on the cover of the book.
Right.
Yeah. So, it's not like I'm sitting here as like eating grapes and watching soap operas.
You'd be totally excused if you were. That'd be
Yeah.
fine. Better to
Mm.
have two good books than, two good books and six crappy books. So, there's always that aspect of it too.
Yeah,
This
that's yeah.
this book you that you don't want to talk about, fair enough.
Mm.
I wanted to ask if it was kind of if there's a sort of a dream project that something that you would, just love to write about if you could or had the time or.
Oh, well, that's probably the project I was talking about.
That's the
But
one.
yeah, but I mean, you know, I would love to collaborate with someone,
Mm.
again on their book. Like that's the dream. Someone with a great, interesting, untold story who wants to work hard.
Can you
Um,
think of any names that would go on a list like that?
well, I mentioned Ringo Starr,
Uh-huh.
uh, he'd be a great one. Um, I gotta say, I think Krist Novoselic probably has a good story to tell.
Mm.
Yeah. But there are not many left. All the
Yeah,
big ones have done their books.
right,
Um, uh, and then there are just a few, but mostly in it, for the story and for someone who wants to work hard to make something really, really good.
right. Uh, I have to ask you about that snare drum behind you.
Yeah, that's I was a drummer for
Right.
many years. I started, I'm largely self-taught. I started when I was 7, made a bunch of noise with my friends Chris and Bruce from down the road. And then eventually I've made three albums
Yeah.
and done a bunch of touring, and I've done that whole thing. And so I like a lot of drummers, I was just in search of the perfect snare. And that the one behind me is actually not one of them. Hence it's sitting on a shelf. But
No,
that's
but it looks
yeah, that's
neat.
like I think it's from the 20s.
Yeah.
And it's a really cranky drum. It's not something you would take on the road or anything like that, because if
No.
and one of the parts broke, you'd be out of luck.
All right. Well, listen,
And
my
the
friend.
and oh, on the gold record behind me is from De La Soul.
Sorry, it's from who?
De La Soul.
Oh, wow. Great. Nice.
Yeah, I was a really early booster of theirs. I wrote about them quite a bit, and in gratitude, they gave me that gold record.
Oh, very
To
cool.
my
Is
eternal
that the only
gratitude.
one you have?
Yeah, that's my only gold record. Yeah, yeah. I'm just a journalist.
I still got one more to
I'm
do.
extremely uh blessed to even have that one.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, listen, my friend, I have taken up enough of your time today. So I will let you get back to your life of eating grapes and watching soap operas.
Right. Buffing my nails also. Yeah.
Ah, of course. Well, buffing your own nails? Come on, you got to get somebody to buff those nails for you.
And they could also feed me the grapes.
There you go. It all lines up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, well, yeah. Thanks for the advice. Yeah,
All right. Well, listen, thanks for your time today. Thanks for the books. I look forward to whatever this next dream project is, and
yeah.
we'll talk to you about it when it comes out, hopefully.
Very, very good. Thank you for your time.
All right. You take
Okay.
care.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.